What if you could build a billion-dollar beauty brand by doing exactly the opposite of what your competitors are doing? Today's guest is Joey Sharma, co-founder of e.l.f. Cosmetics, the brand that revolutionized the beauty industry by proving you could sell high-quality makeup for just $1. Starting as a 20-year-old with no MBA and a radical idea that the industry laughed at, Joey bootstrapped e.l.f. from his father's warehouse, got rejected by every major retailer, ultimately taking the company public at over $1 billion and creating generational wealth in the process. So in this conversation, you're going to discover how to identify white space in saturated markets by doing the exact opposite of incumbents, the art of turning rejection into opportunity, and why getting passed on by retailers force them to build something bigger, and the critical lessons about exits that Joey wishes he'd known before doing his first deal.
Hear the stories, learn the proven methods, and accelerate your growth and future through entrepreneurship. Welcome to the Foundr Podcast with Nathan Chan.
All right, so the first question I want to ask you is, what early influences shaped your entrepreneurial career and journey and drive to build something that is marketable and, distinct from your father's business?
Yeah, so I come from a community of immigrants, and really they find ways to become successful in the environment that they're given. So my grandfather wasn't successful. My father lost his father at an early age and really built his business from the ground up, joining as a low employee to eventually buying out all the partners and being the owner of the business. And that's really the world I came from. It wasn't corporate, it wasn't law, it wasn't medicine. And I always had a drive to be successful. I had a drive. I was a natural born leader in certain regards, but I was also a problem solver. And I really looked for a way. I didn't really look for it. It really came to me when I was interning at my father while I was in college, when I was 18, 19 years old. And my father asked me, do you want to do this business or find something else? I was like, I really don't want to do this business. His business was an apparel manufacturer. He did a lot of private label for some big retailers in the US. He didn't have his own brand, so he used their brand, and he was very, very successful, but he didn't really have anything to continue to any brand appeal. I was at NYU Stern, majoring in international business and marketing. So I was one of the few guys in the program who wasn't majoring in finance or accounting and something a little bit more esoteric in the marketing piece and the international piece. And that's really what led me to have a desire to build a brand. This was in the dot-com boom in the early 90s, early 2000s, late 90s and early 2000s. This was when there was a lot of M&A happening and acquisitions, and you saw some of it in the beauty space, although it was way before I really was even in beauty. And we kind of said, okay, what can we do, or what can we put our spin on using some of the resources and network that we have to bring a product to market. And that's how we kind of got it. We identified a sector before we identified a product line. So we saw the dollar store retailers. We saw Family Dollar and Dollar General here in the US growing exponentially, thousands of stores open, hundreds of stores opening a year. And we said, okay, what can we sell to those retailers? And we went in and we saw there was a bunch of cosmetic offerings, and there was two main offerings. One of them was closeouts. So old product that was returned from other drugstores or other places, and they were on the shelves, no consistency, no continuity. It's really a treasure hunt type of mentality. And the other were non-branded brands, stuff that you wouldn't want to put on your face, stuff that was all about quantity over quality, stuff that didn't resonate at all with a girl or a woman in a bar wanting to pull out of her purse and put it on her lips. And we said, we think there's something here. And that's how the whole genesis of the entrepreneurship started.
Okay, so talk me through kind of how much did it cost to start e.l.f? How much did you put in? And this whole concept of, I guess, making the numbers work because the idea of selling beauty products, for $1 is something that's hard, in those days for people to wrap their head around. And it was so drastically different to anything else out there.
Right. So I've been asked that question many, many times over my career, and I kind of ask it back to someone who asks me. I said, "Why are you asking me why I can't do it? But why aren't you asking the big conglomerates why they can't do it?" And when you look at the two components of what makeup, you have the raw materials and you have the componentry. So the raw materials are not that expensive for the most part. And that's not so, but if you, and then the other piece is the componentry, which does have a lot of variability based on materials, weight, finishes, and things like that. But then when you look at the marketing budget, the spokesman, everything else that is put into the cosmetic product, we stripped all that out. And we were able to really source a line of 13 categories across 67 SKUs across eyes, lips, and face. So we had lip gloss, we had pressed powders, we had mascara, we had 13 items, and across those items, 67 SKUs. And we placed our initial order for $125,000 of product, and we brought in every one of those 13 categories in assortment packs with a little plastic tray. So if we were buying lip glosses, we would buy the 4 colors of the lip glosses, 6 colors of the lip glosses, 6 colors each, a 36-piece pack in a little tray, and we brought that in. So it was about $125,000 of inventory that we brought in to really test the market.
Hey Foundr fam, I want to take a quick break from the conversation to talk to you about something super exciting. We're officially partnered with Omnisend, the email marketing and SMS platform built specifically for e-commerce founders. We've been recommending Omnisend to Foundr students for a while now because it just works. Whether you're launching your first store or you're scaling to 7 figures, it really helps you automate your marketing and get real results. Did you know on average, Omnisend customers make $68 for every $1 they spend, which is an insanely good return on investment. And because you're part of the Foundr community, you get 50% off your first 3 months with the code FOUNDR50. Just head to omnisend.com/Foundr without the E to get started. All right, now let's jump back into the show. Yeah, and was getting into retail easy? I know you've got some great stories. You got to tell the Bloomingdale's one, but before we do, because that was a big turning point, I want to know how that came about. Was it strategic and seeded? Like, talk me through that. And then, but yeah, how'd you get your first sales? How'd you bust down the doors to get into retail? Because you'd never done this before. This is what, sub 20 years ago, like this is your first business, like, young kid. I know at Target you had problems where they didn't like the name of your brand. So talk me through that.
So I wish I would say it was easy, although I know I wish it wasn't easy, because what happened really shaped both me and the company. So the first thing that happened was we took our concept to the dollar stores I mentioned, to Dollar General and Family Dollar, and we showed them what a quality line of opening price point cosmetics would be. And their reaction was, it's nice, but it's not for us. We're not interested. We're committed to our quantity over quality. And we did 2 things that really enabled us to really push through to the market. So if the customers or the retailers weren't going to take us in, we were going to kind of push it through. And being a young 20-year-old kid, I really was aggressive. We hired a PR firm. The PR firm took us around. I did the desk sides myself. We went to Glamour magazine and Lucky magazine back in the time. And we went New York, place to place, and we showed everyone our product. And all the editors love it. We didn't tell them the price. We just showed them the product. We let them try it. We let them get a sense of the product. And then at the end of the interview, at the desk side, we said it's going to be $1. And they're like, what? No way. That's crazy. That's crazy. And then we went home. And then a few months later, I was actually walking to lunch. It was May 2004. And Glamour magazine called us up and said, we want to put your concealer in the magazine. And we said, great. They said, there's only one problem. There's no way for our readers to get it. We said, okay. They said, either you go into all Walgreens, a drugstore chain in the US, all of Walgreens by next month, or you open a website. We're like, well, we're not getting into Walgreens, so we'll open a website. So we had a website, but it didn't have an e-commerce. This was back in 2004. E-commerce was Amazon was just getting out there. So we spent $5,000 on a shopping cart functionality of our already existing website. And it was June 16th, 2004. We launched our website. At the time, there was an email blast called Daily Candy that was eventually bought by AOL. It's now closed. Daily Candy picked us up. It wasn't even a dedicated email. It was a one-line email. And there's this brand that launched, e.l.f. Cosmetics. It's going to be $1. All items are $1. I remember coming into the office that day in New Jersey. We were in the warehouse, and we had 400 orders. And we're like, wait, maybe there's something here. And that kept happening for the next few years, about a year or so from 2004. We continued to pursue retailers, but we would get a press hit in Lucky and Vogue and Glamour. And, and every time we got a press hit, we would see a spike. And then and then it would cool down, and then we'd get a spike. And every week, every month, there would be something. And we were chugging along. I mean, in 2004, we probably did a total of maybe $1.5 million, $1.6 million in sales. I remember being up at night seeing, okay, how are we going to do $125,000 in sales this month? A number that they probably do in an hour where we are today. But really, it's that grit and that drive that fueled our success moving forward. And that went on for a few years. Small business. HEB was the first store so one of the big challenges we had launching a dollar brand of cosmetics was a lot of the retailers didn't want to trade their customers down. If they're selling a CoverGirl lip gloss for $6, they don't want to sell your e.l.f. lip gloss for $1. They just lost $5 at the register. So it was HEB. It's a southern chain based in San Antonio, Texas, that allowed us to we had this 4-sided spinner rack. It was about 4 feet tall. It spun on 4 sides, and it had product on pegs. And they said, okay, we're going to put a few of these spinner racks in our stores. They're like big stores like Costco. And I remember we got an email after the rack was selling out by the day. Like, you put the product in, they've sold out, they refilled it, it sold out. And we got an email from the buyer, which was probably one of the best emails we got ever. And it said, I was concerned about putting you in because I didn't want to trade my customer down, but it's been proven that the e.l.f. brand is incremental, and people, because of the price, they're buying it on impulse, and we're seeing a lift in the overall department. And that became a huge driver for us as we continue to grow the brand in more traditional mass, that we can prove that this brand is not just going to take less dollars, but because of its impulsivity and its incrementality, it's going to grow the overall department sales.
So talk me through margin. Like, how much margin would you make on selling one pack?
Look, we had margin goals. One thing that we did, and one of our approaches was about simplicity. So it was simplicity from to the customer, to the retailer, to the people on the retail floor, the boys stocking the shelves, and that. So we developed a one price point mentality. So everything we sold was at 59 cents to retail for $1. Every card was pretty much the same size, height, so it could all fit. Every product was color-coded. So everything was about simplicity. So we had a varying margin across our brand. One of the things we launched was a line of brushes. Was an early introduction. One of our brushes cost us 54 cents, but we sold it for 59. We equalized that by a lip balm that cost us 19 cents that we sold for 59. So we maintained, and we had a very, very lean team. It was about 4 or 5 of us in the office when we started. And I wore many hats, whether it was answering customer service emails or going to customers or going to source and develop the product across the board. So we did what we needed to do as a company before the company grew. And it was really, really lean, but it was profitable because we operated on a very decent margin, although the dollars were low. The margin was a standard margin.
Yeah. Okay. And then talk me through the Bloomingdale's piece, because that's a very, very crazy story where a rumor went out when you guys were in Bloomingdale's that you guys were going to up the price, and that made things go absolutely gangbusters. Take me back to that moment, because that sounds like that was a real step change, not just in revenue, but just the brand's history, because then eventually, you brought on executive leadership, really rapidly grew, and then eventually IPO'd. But that sounds like a really big turning point. So take me back to that moment and that time. And did you guys seed that on purpose? Was that PR strategically, or was it a mistake?
So I tell everyone, I wish I knew how it happened, because I would do it again and again and again. But I remember vividly, it was Friday in September. We had just come back from a trade show run by a company called GMDC. It was a general merchandise trade show where we met a bunch of buyers. I was sitting in the office. We were having a recap, me, my salesman, and my father, and we were sitting in the office, and all of a sudden the phone rang, and I answered the phone. I got up. I got up. I answered the phone, and I said hello. And the woman got, "Oh, e.l.f, is this real? Is this a real company?" And I said, "Yeah, we're a real company. Why?" She's like, "I just got an email that you're being bought by Bloomingdale's, and all the prices are going up." I said, "What?" She says, "Yeah." And we used to have like on the back end of our website, we would have like a list of the orders that came in. And in the old days, you hit F5, you refresh the screen, and you saw all the new orders that came in. So we would do that on a Tuesday, and you'd see 2 orders, 3 orders an hour, 4 orders. All of a sudden, I hit refresh, and you see another 20 pages of orders. Refresh again, 20 pages of orders. It was Friday. It was Friday afternoon. We said, okay, we'll see what happens. And then it was actually the Jewish New Year that Sunday night. So we unplug on the Jewish New Year, and then the site was continuing to get orders. Then after the New Year ended, we logged on. We had 20,000 orders, and then the next day it just kept going. And then we're like, okay, this is great. We're getting orders. We're getting tons of orders, but we don't have the goods, the merchandise to fulfill these orders. So we're packing orders as quick as we can. My wife came to pack orders. My mother came to pack orders. I mean, we're going to the warehouse. We're drinking from a fire hose. And then I was like, and then they just kept coming. So it was a time where we had about 192,000 orders. And we're like, we can't do this from here. We don't have it. So I got on a plane a Saturday night. I went to China, where our factories were, and we created a process, a pick line, the products, and everything to be able to pack every order overseas. I remember, and I simplified that a lot. I remember being in an elevator on my BlackBerry, speaking to my father, and my father told me, "This is it. You either figure this out, or we just pack up shop and go home." And I said, "You're right. We're going to figure this out." And we had a great supplier in China who found us space, and they made the product, and we went ahead, and we had tons of issues. I mean, this was like the infinite game of whack-a-mole. So all of us, like we had to print 192,000 orders. How do you print 192,000 orders? The firewall in China was blocking our IP address. We had to walk around that. So there was a lot of issues. But at the end of the day, after 6 weeks, we were able to pack the order in China. So if you placed an order, your order was packed in China, and it was placed in a large shipping container that we aired in. It had a barcode on it. We got scanners. We scanned the barcode. We printed a shipping label here in the US when it got here, and we pumped it into the postal system. And that's how we fulfilled 192,000 orders. And look, there's peaks and valleys, but we were never the same company after that. My cousin got that email. My buyers got that email. Everybody was like getting that email. It was really our first aha moment that this was really real. We went from doing $2 million. We were forecast to do $2 million that year. We ended that year doing $8 million and making money for the first time.
And when you say making money for the first time, you guys were not profitable.
No, we were not profitable for the first few years.
So and that's because you were strategically reinvesting for growth?
It was because there was overhead. We had a few employees, we had an office, we had expenses, and we weren't doing enough business. As I said, in 2004, we would do $1.8 million, and then we grew a little bit, and you have expenses. So it was a break even, a modest loss. We were continuing to bootstrap it as best as we can, and then in 2006, that's when we really first started producing a profit.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, you went from I've got here 300 a week to 18,000 a day over that period for 2 months with Bloomingdale's. That is insane. So talk me through kind of how you guys transitioned and really grew the brand from there, because Shopify started around 2000. It was around 2011, 2010 time, right? So I never forget, I had a friend and one of our instructors in our education platform, where she won the Shopify Build a Business competition, and that was in 2012. So Shopify, one thing that really brought them to life and really kind of started to popularize, I believe, online retail was through Shopify. So you guys still had a bit of time to kind of really start to drive the online success. So talk me through kind of that transition leading up, because you IPO'd in 2016, but yeah, talk me through that piece. So that was a major step change in the growth. What were some strategic moves that you made in those next few years?
Right. So one of the big wins, early wins we had, was a very small relationship with Target. So Target had what they call a trial and travel section. So it's where you go to buy your mini toothpaste, your mini scopes, your mini, if you're traveling and you need stuff for your toiletries. So we were lucky enough to get awarded a lip bin and an eye bin. And it was 2 lip products and 2 eye products where we we had business in Target, very, very small. And then after the Bloomingdale's virality moment and into 2008, Target actually called us up and they said, "We want you to make us a holiday Endcap." We said, "You say we do it, we'll do it." So we gave it a try. We were forecast, and that was for so this was November 2008, and this was to go in for holiday 2009. So 11 months later, in October, we were forecasted to do about 190. Sorry, we were forecasted to do about $80 per store per week. It was a beautiful end cap. It was gift sets. It wasn't our single item, so it was like a $5 or $10 gift set, a pack of products, and we did really, really well. Instead of doing $80, $60 a store a week, we did $200 a store a week through the holiday season. And that led us to get what they call inline space. So they had 4-foot bays. They said, "Okay, we want you to take a 4-foot bay in 660 stores and put the best product forward." The only request they had, which is a big one, was that we weren't only $1, we had $1 and then a higher price point, a little bit. So we said, we don't really do that. But they said, "No, we think it can be done. You guys should try it." So we launched a sub-brand called e.l.f. Studio. So all the e.l.f. packaging was white, it was clean, it was light. And then we did a studio, which had a higher componentry. It was metal instead of plastic, a few more end benefits, maybe a quad of eyeshadow instead of a single. And we launched e.l.f. Studio, and we had 4 feet, 2 feet of e.l.f. and 2 feet of e.l.f. Studio. We promoted it online. We had a big customer base, and that did really, really well. That launched in 660 stores in the end of in March of 2010. And that's really when e.l.f. we really were separating ourselves from the pack, because virality in a Bloomingdale's moment, and the Bloomingdale's moment would repeat itself again in a different form in Nordstrom's in 2007, 8, but once we were in with the big boys in Target and in Walmart, in Target, and we were doing better than a lot of the conglomerates that have been around, or the incumbents that have been around for a long time, that's when we really knew that we had something special. And we really treated Target very, very well. They treated us well. We committed to them for a bunch of years to really grow with them until we went full chain. And that was really, really a step change for the long run.
And from a strategic standpoint, were you focused? Do you believe that focusing on retail first, then online? Like, what was the key move that you made there?
I think the key move was, look, I would love to tell you it was all strategic and all thought out, but any entrepreneur will tell you, if you're lucky enough to have a business plan, the only thing you'll know is that business plan will not come to fruition. It may be better, it may be worse, but if you can't bob and weave, you're not going to be successful. So I think that that's really, we skated where the puck was going, and we've chased the opportunities we had and could find. So yeah, Glamour magazine pushed us to open up a website, which I knew nothing about D2C back then. I don't know much about it now because it continues to evolve, but it's still, and that's how we grew and grew demand for a line that we really believed in. And then the economies of scale that the retail launch gave us very quickly, based on the success. Look, anybody could get an order, but for us to have a business, we needed to perform. And performance isn't just about sales. Sales is very important. But if your shelves aren't stocked and your product's not coming in and your product doesn't resonate with the customer, you're not going to be that good. So it was the strategy in hindsight is, yes, the website, the D2C gave us a customer base, and it also gave us, one of the early successes we had and continue to have, and I'm very proud to say that it's still in the DNA today, is that we never dictated to the customer, but we developed relationships with her and we listened to her. And it was actually a time when we wanted to launch a mineral infused face primer, but we couldn't get the economics to work. We wanted a component. It had to be airtight. It was plastic made in a special factory. No way it could live in e.l.f. Studio for $3. So we said, all right, let's make a product for $6 and we'll test it online. I was very apprehensive. What do you mean, e.l.f. 6? Like, okay, $1 to $3. There was a reason. It made sense, investment, quality, but it's still an extreme value. This was modeled after a La Prairie item that was retailing for $50 or 50 or above. And then we said we're going to give it a try. We launched it at $6, and the customer spoke with her wallet. And we sold out of that product in 6 weeks. And we knew that, look, as long as we stay true to extreme value, no matter what the price point is, then we can sell it to her. And time again, that's how we've grown the business. We've grown the brand.
And you see that today, even though you're not obviously active and involved with e.l.f. anymore. So talk me through. So you had multiple exits with e.l.f. You took some money off the table, minority sale, and then the 2016 IPO. Take me back to that time, because you've actually said that in hindsight, you shouldn't have taken some money off the table and you should have waited. So talk me through all of that and take me back to that moment and what advice you would give to founders, because oftentimes when you're on a really good run and the going is good, that's when you do get tapped on the shoulder, and that's when you think, oh, I'm invincible, it's going to keep going. And it doesn't always pan out that way. Oftentimes, more than not, when I speak to founders, I know this from personal experience as well. And then you reflect and go, oh my God, I should have done something then. And then, so talk me through that moment, how you came to that decision, and also why in retrospect, with hindsight, you think you should have held on a bit longer till the IPO.
So I live by a mantra that I think Walt Disney said, is that success is when luck meets opportunity. And I go back to that time in the elevator when I was in China trying to fulfill those orders. And I go back to, the Bloomingdale's virality. Like we don't know if we got lucky or smart. And it was about 2010 when I got a call from a now very, very good friend who's one of the premier investment bankers in the beauty space. And she said, look, I think you have something here and we want to explore a sale. And, look, my father did well, but not really, not that well where generational wealth can get generated. And we went through a process and I just want to give a nuance. I didn't say I wouldn't have sold the first deal. I would have probably sold less the first time. But, we had multiple exits, or we had multiple exits, and we took money off the table a few times. And I always say the first one, although it was the smallest, was the most impactful, because it really was a change in my personal, like, when I remember when that we did that sale and that money came through and I looked at my father, I was like, we did it. And in hindsight, we've done it a lot of more time, many more times, and it was a lot bigger. But that first one really, really hit home and really took us was really gratifying to see all our success and hard work pay off. And then in 2000, that happened in late 2010, end of 2010, right before in late December 2010. We grew that business, and then an interesting story was 2 years later, L'Oreal came knocking on our door. It was an inbound inquiry, and we were ready to sell the whole company to L'Oreal before e.l.f. went public, before we sold the majority to another private equity firm. And at the last minute, literally the last minute, when you're doing a transaction, you file something in the US called HSR with a deal over a certain size. And the government, it's an antitrust regulation that the government has to rubber stamp, and that allows it to go through. HSR was filed. That's how late in the game we were. At the last minute, L'Oreal called and said, we're gonna pass. And it was devastating, but in hindsight, it was the best thing that really ever happened. A year later, we sold the majority stake to TPG Growth, and they brought in a CEO. Tarang Amin was brought in as the CEO with a management team. And I was relieved. I've been growing this thing for 10 years, didn't know what bootstrapping it, didn't have a ton of strategy, never went to MBA, my master's, had an undergrad degree, and kind of was figuring it out as I went. I remember being in the meeting when they gave us our offer and said, and we're going to bring in a CEO. And I felt like a monkey came off my back. I was like, that's good. And then it was February 1st, 2014, we started. And he came in with a legal counsel, and he came in with a whole exec team. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? Like, this is weird. But then over the next 2 years, we stayed on board before the IPO, and we worked with them, and I learned so much from that opportunity to have my master's degree be at e.l.f. that I created. And I saw so many things as a serial executive he brought to the table that I still do today. Weekly management meetings, high performance team training, SKU rationalization, margin improvement, long-term goals. So much that I learned from them and that team over the next 2 years that I apply today. Some I apply and some I learn as an entrepreneur that's not for us. But it was a fantastic opportunity for us, my father and I, to stick around and learn what else, how regular or traditional CPG companies operate. And we stayed there for 2 years, and then there started being rumblings of an IPO. And although it's exciting and it was financially beneficial, it was time for us to kind of move on, because public companies and entrepreneurs aren't always the best. And we mutually agreed that it was time for us to seek new pastures. We still stayed on the board. We still had a large chunk of equity, and we still went through the IPO process. And I think my father, who's been an investor in public stocks for a long time, will never, ever, ever forget ringing that bell in September 16th, 2016. We got there to the stock market floor that day in Wall Street. The stock exchange was draped with e.l.f. banners, and it was a really amazing, exciting moment when e.l.f. priced at $23 a share and over $1 billion valuation.
Hey guys, I really hope you're feeling inspired from today's interview. The truth is, there's never been a better time to build an e-commerce business. And the best part is, you don't need to do it alone. That's where Foundr Plus comes in, which I'm really excited to share with you. If you are feeling stuck in your e-commerce business, lacking the confidence to really move forward, or you're worrying about making costly mistakes or how to drive your sales, Foundr Plus is here to support you. You get access to a customized learning pathway with proven frameworks from successful e-commerce founders for fast results, a supportive community. We have weekly live mentorship and workshops and exclusive savings on startup tools and 24/7 real human support. You can try Foundr Plus today for just $1 for 7 days so you can accelerate your business goals. Just visit foundr.com/start $trial or click the link in the description to claim your trial. All right, now let's jump back into the show. What a fantastic story. You know, I've spoken to founders that have listed their companies, and a couple have said to me, like, if there's one thing that you wish every entrepreneurial founder to have the opportunity to do is ring that bell. Do you agree with that? It's like winning the game.
I mean, is it winning the game? I think it's validity. You know, it validates you. You know, you started with an idea and you bootstrapped it and you created it and you sweat and toiled it and you blood, sweat, and teared it for years. And now you're showing it to the world and you're saying people are raising their hand to be like, yeah, I want to be part of that. That sounds good. So I look, and many times, every time we went through a sale process, as a young, I was at this time, maybe 28, 29 years old. I always wanted just to cash out. I wanted that big check. I wanted just to, to get that wire in or that big in my account and just know that I was set. But in hindsight, being able to do it time and time and time again, even till today, it's, I'll say this and it's going to sound a little crazy. There's not a big difference to have 10 million or 30 or 50 million dollars. Like it's not functionally different. I mean, yes, it's different. It's 5x. I get numbers. I understand that, but it's not meaningfully different. But when you continue to work and get a chunk and a chunk and a chunk, and it feels more, for me, more gratifying.
So I'd love to go into the details a little bit because I know everyone listening, watching will want to know. They'll be like, Nathan, you got to ask this. So can you share, how much was that first check when you took when there was a minority sale to private equity?
We sold 49% of the company for $35 million. So when I say when it comes out that I never regretted the first sale, but I did regret how much we sold because we could have done everything the same by selling 20 or 30%. But I think and I don't regret anything, but that's one thing that I would have done differently.
Okay. And then when TPG got involved, how much did you sell then?
It was a $265 million valuation.
Okay. And then IPO'd at $1 billion, still had a decent chunk. Wow. So crazy journey. So now let's talk about what happened next because you experienced a rough patch. What happened?
I did. It was after we transitioned out of e.l.f. and before we founded our next company, Fit for Life. It was actually during the diligence stage because it took a while for us to kind of acquire the company, the operating company that is now Fit for Life. And I was home and my kids got up. They went to school. I was in my pajamas. I sat down. I opened my Netflix. I watched House of Cards. And the next thing I knew, my kids came home from school and I'm like, what just happened? Like, how did this happen? I was running this growing cosmetic company and I was doing all that. And now I'm home. I had money in the bank, but I didn't have anything to do. And it's in that moment, I knew that retired life wasn't for me. And I really, I needed to get back in the game and find ways to continue to create something and drive value and build something bigger than I had in the past.
Okay, so talk me through the thinking of AS and acquiring, and revitalizing brands, because it sounds like you took a lot of the lessons you learnt from the exec team that were brought into e.l.f, and now you bought some companies that were somewhat not distressed, would you say, but brands
Distressed.
So
Yeah.
talk me through that kind of, I guess, play, creating your, a suite and talk me through that play of building somewhat of your own private equity company now.
So something we didn't really touch on, but something that really made e.l.f stand out is that the approach I had as an entrepreneur was to do things differently. Whether it be the way we market, the way we create product, the way we listen to our customer, everything was, if the big companies did this, we were going to do that. So when we first saw what was the Gland Sale portfolio, which was a private equity-backed portfolio of Laura Geller, Julep, and another brand called Clark's, which we purchased and sold back to the seller, we saw opportunity, but we also saw a lot of the opportunity that we saw was really based in doing things differently. So really going back to the e.l.f roots of how we market, how we sell, how we source, and doing it on a different type of company, meaning it wasn't a value-based company. It was more premium, more prestige, but taking a lot of that source better, bring it to the market quicker, bring it online. Now Amazon's a bigger player, like doing a lot of that. And we were also able to buy the first two brands out of bankruptcy. So we were able to, it was a lot of inventory. So we had a lot of runway for growth. It was honestly the day after we bought it, it was what part of our thesis was we were going to lean in on Ulta and walk away from QVC. And it was day two, and we got a day two, we came into the office and we got a charge back from Ulta for $1.2 million. We're like, what's this? And then QVC called us up and like, no, you're really important to us. We want to continue this relationship. How do we make it grow? So we actually switched paths. We actually exited Ulta, leaned into QVC. Laura has been a fantastic part of that. But then it was doing all those things that I learned through my e.l.f. bachelor's degree I took with Terang and his team about SKU rationalization, which products we should go forward with. How do we grow margin? How do we do these things? And how do we do it a little bootstrap, do it as an entrepreneur where it's not managing to a budget, but it's managing to your bottom line, which is your pocket. And we've had tremendous success because we had a great product and we're able to operate like operators. And that's really the way we approached as we bought our next brand and our next brand and our next brand. And not all our brands are successful. We bought a brand called Mally, and then we brought a brand called Cover FX, and then we brought Bliss, which is the old spa brand from the 90s, which I remember really well as I was growing e.l.f. And we've seen just tremendous success with the portfolio. And, we have a great team at AS Beauty. We're about 140 people. Now we've grown nicely. We'll do close to $500 million of sales this year across our brands. And we're just really, really proud of the business we built as, entrepreneurs. The AS Beauty is right now operated by me and my father, and also another father and son, and the Azrak family, who teamed up with us as we entered this new phase.
Yeah, wow, impressive. So talk me through, you mentioned multiple times, you define success as when luck meets opportunity. How do you prepare to leverage luck, and what advice would you give to founders to cultivate this mindset?
I think in anything you do, you're having obstacles. So the way we approach it is obstacles can either hold you back or be stepping stones. And you have to find ways to bulldoze through or jump through those or leverage those stepping stones to take you to the next level. And every step along the way, you're always planning, and you always have a goal in mind, but know that there's going to be changes, and you need to be adaptable to change. Two things I really like to live by. One is, again, from Terang, who used to say, hardly ever right, but never in doubt. You got to make a decision and go with it. And you're not going to always be right, but you have to have conviction, and you have to show your team that you're convicted. in your decisions. And the second thing that I live by, which is really part of my DNA, is that perfection isn't an option. And don't wait for things to be perfect because they're never going to be. And I'd rather get something out and fix it than try to get something perfect and wait. And that's really, we just got to go. Like when we were relaunching our website, it's not, is every detail perfect? No. But if it is, it's going to take too long. So time is not always on your side. And you just want to get things to the market so you can read and react, because no matter how much you spend time on it, it's going to be second nature to you. And you always need fresh eyes and fresh perspectives.
I think that's a fantastic insight. So when it comes to the market, what current exciting trends are you seeing right now, leading into Black Friday, Cyber Monday of 2015, we're coming into Q4 very, very soon, particularly around product innovation, sustainability, consumer engagement. Talk me through that and trends.
I think the biggest trend is just consumer education. They know so much more than they did because of social, because of TikTok, because of Instagram, because they're learning. I mean, my 17-year-old daughter knows more about skincare than I'll ever know. I mean, she could run the company. She could run PD better than I can. There's just so much information out there. And a lot of these things, sustainability and clean, they're table stakes. Like it's not an option today. You have to be clean. You have to be sustainable. I think efficacy is something we're seeing a lot of. I think innovation in efficacy around both color cosmetics as well as skincare and hair care. You're just seeing so much science come into the world. And I think AI is going to fuel that because there's so much information out there and it's just being really processed quicker. But there's the customer. You can't, not that we were fooling the customer, but we didn't have to tell the customer everything. Now it's a conversation with her. She knows what salicylic acid is, or naminicide, or any of these like she knows what they are. Vitamin C, what the benefits are. Like she understands that, and that's really how we're winning, is by listening to her and speaking to her and being true to her. And everything we bring to market is something that I would bring home and give to my wife or give to my daughters or feel comfortable using myself. Like that's how you win.
And when it comes to the beauty space, some would say it's very saturated. What advice would you give to a founder that wants to enter the beauty space?
It's hard. It is really hard. When I started e.l.f., there was like 4 brands out there and you couldn't get space. There was no .com, there was no Instagram, there was no social, there was nothing. And now, yes, everybody who wants to launch a skincare brand either has a social channel or like all these celebrities. There's just ways to get the product out there. So you have to have the white space. You have to be different. You can't differentiate alone on price. You have to have functional end benefits that people want. And you have to have a community that's engaged, excited, and that helps spread the word.
Okay. One last question, because we have to work towards wrapping up. But if you could give one piece of advice for founders that have launched and they want to grow, because you have an incredible track record of growing consumer-led brands, what advice would that be?
I think everybody wants to get to the end game, but really life is a journey, not a destination. And you don't get there by jumping to the end. You get there step by step. So don't look at how you're going to go from $1 to 100 million. But first you got to go to 1, then 5, then 10, then 100. And everything is about incrementality. I think you have to have goals in mind and KPIs to get there. And you need to continue to track to those goals as things change. And yes, goals can change, but the end goal will be there if you have the patience and the depth of both pocket and product to get there.
All right, last question. Was there anything that you wanted me to ask you that I didn't? Any question that I didn't ask you that you wanted to share? Anything that I didn't cover that you're really passionate about that you think more founders need to hear?
I think one thing I just want to mention is that outside of the liquidity that we got, through our first transaction back in 2010, the biggest change we had is from managing to what we called net income to managing to this new thing called EBITDA, which we didn't know what that was, or we did, but we did. And that's a big nuance. When you're an entrepreneur and it's your business and you own the company, every dollar the company makes is your dollar. Now that you have partners and you have people to answer to or work with, or a board, there's a lot of benefits in having a bird's eye view of the business, benefits in thinking strategically and not just operationally day in and day out. But now you're managing towards a number that's, I don't want to say fake, but less real, if I could, in the EBITDA. And it was different. It was definitely different making that switch to net income to EBITDA. And as we grew, we understand more and more how companies are valued and how people look at it. But it's definitely a very much of a game changer. And I would say to entrepreneurs that are going through a sale process or thinking about taking private equity or any type of outside capital, in that don't just think of the day you get the deal done, but think past that, because that's where you get hooked, can get hooked up, messed up, not messed up, but you could kind of get caught up a little bit, because you're so laser focused on the day of the deal, which is a great day and it's life changing and it's exciting for many, many people. But there's a day after the deal, and the day after the deal is the day you have to live with for the rest of your life. And you have to make sure you're making the right deal as an employee, as if you're staying on, as in terms of compensation and long-term incentives, and what's going to continue to make you want to continue to grow the company outside of the equity that you have. So I think that's an important piece that people don't always think of as they look to take an investment on to their baby.
Awesome. Well, look, Joey, thank you so much for taking the time, giving back to our community. This was a fantastic interview. And congratulations again on all your success. Looking to see what you continue to build with AS.
Great meeting you. Thank you for having me. And I look forward to seeing the finished product.
All right. So if you love this episode, make sure to check out my interview with Alex Hormozi on how he scales companies from zero straight to $2 million a month in less than a year.
People were like, how have you achieved what you achieved? But like, there's 5 years of my life that disappeared. In fact, I lost all the money, which I talk about in the book. I had all the gyms, I did the turnarounds, and then I had $0 5 years later because of mistakes that I made. But the things that I was gaining was not the money, it was the skills, it was the character traits, and the beliefs.